My name is Alice, I'm 35 years old and I'm a single mother to a 9-year-old girl named Emma. I live in Brooklyn and work as an accountant for a small real estate firm. My life was ordinary, steady, without much drama. Until that night. At one of the most lavish weddings in New York, the kind where crystal lights twinkle and guests laugh in elegant gowns, I stood there trying to keep calm while my own younger brother, Lucas, turned me into a joke from the podium. They called me a burden. Sting. My mother even threw her glass down and pointed for me to leave, all while hundreds of guests looked on with indifference. I didn't say a word. I only held my daughter's hand and tried to walk away in silence. Just when I thought it was over, the bride, Madison, someone I had met only a few times before the wedding, suddenly stepped onto the stage, grabbed the microphone, and what she said next stunned the whole room into silence. A secret buried for years was exposed. A seemingly perfect family collapsed right in the middle of their own wedding. Have you ever been made to feel like an outsider by your own family? Have you ever left a room where everyone turned their backs on you? If you've experienced something similar, leave a comment below. Hit like and subscribe so you can follow me to the end of this story. What happened next still feels unbelievable to me. I walked into the ballroom with Emma's small hand clasped tightly in mine. Her pale purple dress fluttered with each step, and her eager eyes drank in the room full of crystal lights and white flowers. I just tried to steady my breathing. On the outside I smiled, but inside was a nameless storm. No one came to meet us. No one truly looked at us. People passed by as if I were a server who'd accidentally brought a child along. I gripped my purse, told myself to stay calm, and kept walking until I found table 15, where we'd been seated. Near the restrooms. Near the kitchen doors. Far from the stage and the family's head table. I wasn't surprised. Just a sharp sting. But Emma smiled when I folded a napkin into a heart and whispered, "Mom used to learn this at the restaurant long ago." She beamed. Like magic, Mom. We sat there among the smells of food and the clinking of plates, trying to make a small world of our own at a party that wasn't meant for us. I scanned the room and caught my mother Patricia's gaze. She sat composed at the head table in a dark silk dress, hair pinned high as if she owned the event. She didn't smile. She wasn't surprised to see me. Just a faint, bored curl of her lip before she turned away, lifted her champagne glass, and continued laughing with the guests beside her. I could no longer recognize that woman. Or maybe she had never been who I thought. Lucas stood by the stage, a perfectly tailored tuxedo, arm around Madison, the bride, like it was the role he'd been born to play. When he noticed me, his expression faltered for a beat. Maybe surprise, maybe irritation. He stepped over, tapped my shoulder lightly with his fingertip and said, "You made it. Emma's gotten big." "Hi, Lucas," I replied, calm. "Thanks for inviting me." He didn't ask anything else, didn't look at my daughter a second time. He turned away and hurried back to his group of laughing friends. Emma tugged my sleeve. "Is that Uncle Lucas?" I nodded. "He doesn't look like the picture." "Yeah. Maybe he's busy hosting today." I wasn't sure if that answer was enough, but Emma fell silent and started to play with her dinner roll. I swallowed the growing lump in my throat. The reception went on with laughter and soft music from the string quartet in the corner. When Madison entered, every eye turned to her. Her white dress shimmered and hugged her slim frame, but her face was oddly tranquil. Not radiant. Not moved. Just a calm expression, as if she were watching the ceremony behind a frosted pane. As she walked past our table, Madison nodded at me. So slight that others might not notice it, but I did. I returned a small smile, though my heart was racing. I didn't know why she looked at me as if I were there for a reason beyond the obligations of family ceremony. Dinner was served. The dishes were artful, but Emma only nibbled a bit of bread and butter. She wriggled and whispered, "Mom, I don't like this vegetable. It's bitter." I tore off a piece of bread for her and smoothed her hair. "Then just eat this." Then the lights softened. The microphone buzzed. A middle-aged man, a college friend of Lucas, stepped up and told a silly story about their party days in school. The room chuckled. Next came Madison's cousin, reading a poem about love and new beginnings. I was about to take another sip when Lucas mounted the stage. I squeezed Emma's hand. She looked up, eyes wide as if waiting for something beautiful. Lucas raised his glass. "Thanks to everyone for coming. Today is the best day of my life. There are so many special people here, He scanned the room and stopped on me. Like my sister Alice. She taught me that sometimes you can survive life by sheer stubbornness and by being alone. A few polite chuckles. I felt Emma's small hand tighten around mine. She's a single mother. A warrior who stands alone because no one wanted to stand with her. The laughter grew louder, clearer. Many guests nodded and tapped their glasses. A few looks turned my way, curiosity, pity, even glee. But I respect her, Lucas continued, because she proves that even when you hit rock bottom, you can still keep going. Even if you go it alone. Emma turned pale. Mom, Uncle Lucas is making fun of you, right? I pressed my lips together. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to react in the way they expected. Before I could answer, another voice cut across, colder and more bitter than anything before. That girl is a failure cloaked in decency. My mother. Fisha. She didn't stand. She reclined, raised her wine and added, they can polish appearances, but underneath remains the stain on this family. The clink of her glass echoed like a slap. But the real slap came moments later. She rose and walked straight to our table. Emma flinched and tucked close to me. Her hand came down across my cheek with no hesitation. The music stopped. No one moved to stop it. No one at all. Then she leaned in and hissed in my ear with contempt, "Get out of here. You ruined this whole event." I sat frozen. My cheek burning. Emma sobbed into my side. The room felt taut like a wire. No one spoke up. No one intervened. All eyes watched. Stop. The voice didn't belong to me. It wasn't a guest. It came from the stage. When I looked up, Madison, the bride, was walking toward us, her gaze sharp as a blade. Her white gown brushed across the marble floor, each step decisive. She had the microphone in hand. She stopped in front of our table facing Patricia and said, "No one deserves to be treated like that. Especially someone like her." The room went silent. And I had no idea what would happen next. Madison remained there, amid the dim lights and heavy silence. Her voice rang out clear and decisive, not a tremor in it. I can't stay silent any longer. Not when this woman, the one who was just publicly humiliated, is the only person here who still has dignity. People murmured. Patricia froze, eyes wide, but Madison did not flinch. She is not a stranger. She is the groom's sister. And she is the mother of a wonderful child who had to witness all of this horror simply because you are ashamed of circumstances that you yourselves created. I held Emma's hand tightly. My whole body still trembled from the pain and anger. But Madison's words echoed something I had forgotten. The part of me that had been proud, brave, and dreamed of better things for myself and my daughter. I never imagined that the only one to stand up in that room would be a bride who had been part of this family for less than 2 years. Madison's gaze settled on me. "I cannot be silent," she repeated, "because I know things no one dares to speak. Things they have covered up for years." The atmosphere suddenly grew heavy. All eyes turned to her. I sat there frozen. Emma looked up, her eyes rimmed with red, quietly watching the woman in the white dress approach us. Madison took a deep breath. Then she turned toward the stage and signaled to the technician. The huge LED screen behind them began to light up. Not a love montage as is usual at weddings. Instead, document files appeared. Email excerpts. Images of signatures. Transfer receipts. "Lucas," Madison said plainly, "used Alice's name to open an investment account 8 years ago. While she was working 3 jobs at once, Lucas forged her signature to withdraw hundreds of thousands of dollars from our grandparents' line of credit to start his business." A hush rippled through the room. Patricia roared, "That's not true. You're making it up." "No, you know exactly." Madison turned and looked directly at her. "You signed the financial guarantee form when Lucas was first in trouble. And you used your parental authority to quash the bank's internal investigation when Alice didn't respond because she never knew she had that account." I was stunned. I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing. Memories of those years flooded back. I remembered nights in the tiny bathroom of our old rented apartment, Emma fallen asleep in my lap while I counted every penny for a packet of noodles or a bottle of formula for the next day. I remembered walking nearly 2 miles at night so I could make the late shift at the hotel when the last bus had already stopped running. I remember it all clearly. I never received a single cent from my family. I had been a top finance student, one of the few to receive an honors scholarship. I still recall the day I was invited to a summer internship at a major investment fund in Boston. I called David immediately. He shouted on the phone, "That's amazing. We'll celebrate." I still have the message he sent that night. "You don't have to do everything on your own anymore." We were married that fall, right after I finished the internship. David worked as a construction engineer, gentle, hardworking. We lived in a small apartment on the west side of the city, not luxurious but warm enough. Emma was born the following spring while I was finishing my final credits. We planned that after maternity leave I would return to school, finish my degree, and begin the career I dreamed of. David would take Emma to daycare and I would start working at a big firm. But then he collapsed on the living room floor one rainy evening. I had just set the bottle on the stove when I heard the thud behind me. David died from a ruptured blood vessel in his brain. No warning signs. No goodbye. Emma was only 3 months old. Right after the funeral, my mother, Patricia, stared at me across a family meeting and said plainly, "I'm not supporting my grandchild. You married a poor man, you deal with it." No one spoke up. Lucas sat there, head bowed, silent. I dropped out of the program. I took a job at a nearby coffee shop during the day and worked the hotel front desk at night. Some months, when rent was tight, I picked up extra cleaning shifts. I never asked them for a single cent. I didn't want to beg. But I never imagined they would use my name to deceive others, then use me as an excuse for Lucas's failures. On the screen now was the email Madison had sent to the law firm she had hired to review Lucas's records. It listed 3 transfers from the account, Alice G. Warren, to Lucas's business account during the first 2 years after he launched his brokerage. "I never had an account like that." Patricia shouted, "You are nothing in this family. Don't meddle." Madison replied without raising her voice, "I am the woman who was about to marry your son. I have a right to know what sort of family I'm joining. And I will not let Alice's daughter grow up thinking silence is the only way to survive." I couldn't understand what had driven her to do this. But I felt something I hadn't felt in 9 years, being seen. Being acknowledged. Emma gripped my hand, her eyes shining. "Mom, I don't understand it all. But I think you're not wrong." I bent and kissed her forehead. My chest still hurt from the slap, but my breathing eased. A server handed the microphone back to Madison. He turned to Lucas. "Do you want to say something?" Lucas stood statue still. His face was ashen. His hands trembled. And there I sat among all those changing gazes. No longer curiosity, no longer contempt. Only astonishment. I didn't know what would come next, but I felt the door they had shut in my face beginning to open. 3 weeks before that wedding night, I had received a thick envelope, ivory white with a gold trim, the kind used for expensive events, the sort of occasions I'd never been on the guest list for. My hands felt a little cold when I picked it up. The recipient's name was printed in a stylized font on the front, Aubrey Warren. I paused. I had never been Aubrey. Not on any paperwork, not at family gatherings, not in the memories my mother insisted on assigning me, distorted, patched, and full of prejudice. I set the envelope on the table, beside a stack of unpaid electricity bills and a little purple hair clip Emma had left behind. I stared at it a long time. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Reflex. The same way they had tossed me aside in their lives. But I did not. I opened the card. Inside it was glossy, the ink a glinting gold. Each letter was crafted like jewelry. "Lucas Emery Warren and Madison Lee Carter cordially invite you to the wedding of their marriage, to be held at the Astoria Grand Ballroom, New York." No personal note. No mention of Emma. No +1. Nothing that suggested I was expected. I read it 3 times. Maybe to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Or maybe because I hoped to find something softer in all that polished formality. But the card remained cold. Direct. Too perfect. I folded it up and set it beside the half-empty water bottle, then bowed my head and sighed. That night I didn't bring it up. I washed dishes, checked Emma's math homework, hung laundry, and went to bed as usual. Emma lay with her back to me, clutching the old stuffed rabbit David had given her when she was born. I looked at the warm yellow nightlight and listened to the ceiling fan turn slowly while thinking about the people who had once been family. The next morning I got up earlier than usual to make breakfast and pack Emma's lunch. When I came into the living room, Emma was sitting, folding paper to make a birthday card for a classmate. She looked up when she saw me. "Is there a letter for Mom?" she asked. I hesitated, then answered in a small voice, "Yes." I handed her the card. Emma opened it carefully and read each line slowly. Her eyes lit up. "Uncle Lucas is getting married. Mom, the wedding will have pretty dresses, a big cake and music, right?" I nodded. "I think so. Can we go, Mom?" I didn't know what to say. Emma had never been to a wedding. I usually avoided such events or wasn't invited. But looking at her eager face as if she were about to step into a fairy tale, I couldn't say no. I took the card back and showed her there was no name for her. "You're not on it, sweetheart." Emma frowned, tilted her head. "Then write my name on it, okay? They just forgot." Her innocent answer tightened my chest. She didn't know that some people never forget. They simply choose not to see. I said nothing more. I just hugged her tight. 3 days later, I quietly emailed to confirm we would attend. I wrote only one line: "Alice Warren confirms attendance." I didn't ask whether Emma could come. I didn't want to beg for a place for my child. If they didn't want to see their granddaughter, they could look me in the eye and refuse. I went online to find a dress to rent. With a limited budget, I chose a simple navy dress with a square neckline and a soft drape, formal but not flashy. I wanted Emma to feel like she was going to a worthy event, even if I couldn't wear designer labels or expensive jewelry. Emma picked her own dress, a lavender frock with puffy sleeves and a bow at the back. She spun in front of the mirror. The skirt flared, her cheeks flushed, and in that instant I saw David there, the way he used to look at Emma as if she were the best thing life had given him. I sat and curled Emma's hair into soft ringlets. My hand trembled slightly while pinning a flower clip in her hair. She placed her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Mom, you're beautiful." I smiled and touched her cheek. "Thank you, little angel." That afternoon I packed buttered rolls in a small bag, along with a few snack packs in case Emma got hungry during the reception. I knew fancy events often serve food kids won't eat. And I knew no one would care. We arrived about 20 minutes before the time on the invitation. The ballroom was packed, warm with golden light, and a string ensemble played a classical love song in the corner. People were busy laughing, raising glasses, adjusting gowns. No one recognized me. We stood quietly at the edge of the lobby for a moment. I looked around for table 15. When I took Emma by the hand to approach, the host glanced at us and then away without a word. No one led us to a seat. No one greeted us. I pulled out a chair for Emma. It was a little low for her size, so I folded a napkin and tucked it behind her to lift her up. She giggled, looking at me as if I'd just performed a small miracle. "We're the best team, aren't we, Mom?" "Yes." "The undefeated team," I whispered like a promise. I surveyed the vast room, round tables draped in ivory linens, candles twinkling in tall crystal glasses. I knew we weren't welcome. But I also knew I could not disappear the way they wanted me to. I would sit there, hold my head high, and let them see that even if they crossed my name out of the family story, there remained a page they could not erase. A page I had written with blood, tears, and all the years I'd lived, endured, and refused to break. I was never a failure. I was simply someone they refused to remember. But I still came. And I would not leave quietly. The clink of knives and spoons on plates rose from the surrounding tables. Servers slipped by like shadows in white shirts, carrying silver trays piled with artfully presented dishes. Emma craned her neck to look at the entree that had just been set down, wrinkling her nose. "I think I'll just eat the bread, Mom," she said softly. I smiled, tore a roll in half, and put a little more butter on her plate. "Eat whatever you like. I brought a few snack packs in case you're still hungry." Like a superhero hiding secret snacks, Emma whispered and laughed, her eyes curved and clear as water. I nodded and smoothed my daughter's hair, trying to keep my hand from shaking. Across the table, a few older women stared at me, then leaned in toward each other and whispered. I couldn't make out the words, but their looks said enough. I was all too familiar with that kind of gaze. Judgment wrapped up in a glance. Some avoided looking me in the face as if I were a stain on their immaculate tablecloth. Others had no qualms about turning to take me in from head to toe, then looking away as if they had seen something that spoiled their meal. I poured more water into my glass and sat up straighter. Emma nibbled her roll, oblivious to the tightening tension building in the air around us. Then the lights softened. A deep male voice came over the mic at center stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for some well wishes, memories, and a few laughs. Please welcome the groom, Lucas Warren, to say a few words." I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them and watched my brother make his way to the stage to scattered applause. He smiled, adjusted his collar, lifted a champagne flute. The warm lights reflected off the glass, giving him a fake halo. Lucas cleared his throat and gave the room a look of familiar self-satisfaction. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate with us today," he said in a tone more like a TV host than a groom at his own wedding. "I feel very lucky. I have Madison, this wonderful woman, by my side, and I'm surrounded by close friends in this room, even a few surprises in attendance." The audience chuckled politely. Lucas kept going. "There are old friends, great colleagues, and my sister Alice." I looked at him. A chill spread from my chest into my arms. "Where is she sitting?" Lucas pretended to shield his eyes in search, then pointed toward us. "Oh, over there. By the restroom." Laughter erupted. I stayed seated. Emma turned to me, eyes wide, not understanding what was happening. Lucas raised his glass and continued. "I have to say, maybe everyone needs a mirror in life, to remind you that failure isn't the end. Looking at my sister's life, I've learned that if you can fall and still get up even when no one invites you back, you have a special kind of resilience." A few people laughed out loud. Some glanced at me and then away. Others covered their mouths as if they'd just heard a dark joke. I gripped the chair arm. Emma looked at me, quietly taking my wrist and whispering, "Mom, he's really talking about you, right?" Before I could answer, another voice cut in, sharper, colder. "Of course he is, sweetheart. Your mother hasn't done anything with her life." I turned. Fisha. My mother. Her eyes bulged slightly, lips pressed into a contemptuous smile as she sat at the head table. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried across half the room. A dropout, a widow living off other people's charity, now sitting there as if she deserves to be included. More laughter. My face burned. Not with anger, with humiliation. I hadn't expected my mother to go that far. The air in the hall felt like it had been siphoned of oxygen. People laughed, but it was strained, uneasy. A press camera near the wings kept rolling. I saw the little red recording light blink. A lens pointed straight at Lucas. I stood up. Emma stood too, bewildered, tears forming in her eyes as she gripped my hand. "Mom, are we going home?" I nodded and brushed her cheek. We turned to leave the table. But we had only taken one step when a chair thumped behind us and the sound of high heels hammered across the marble. I looked back. Patricia had sprung up, holding a champagne glass. She walked straight toward me. "Thinking of leaving in the middle of the reception? Who do you think you are?" I said nothing. Bent down to lift Emma. But Patricia moved faster. Then, before 100 watching eyes, she raised her hand and slapped me so hard I staggered. The room fell silent. Her glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. "You're my shame. Do you understand? A blot I have spent my life trying to erase," she hissed. I cradled my cheek. It burned. Emma screamed and threw herself at me, arms clinging. "Don't hit my mom. Please don't." Her voice broke like glass. I dropped to my knees, pulling my child in tight, my heart pounding. From the head table, Madison sprang to her feet, her gown sweeping the floor as she ran. Her heels struck out a steady, urgent rhythm. "Enough." Her voice rang out, firm and stopping the room cold. I looked up. Madison stood on the stage, eyes locked on Patricia. "I will not be silent. Not when hatred and cruelty are wrapped in the name of family like this." Amid all those staring faces, Madison moved forward, raised her hand and took the microphone from the MC. And at that moment another door began to open. Not just for me. For a truth they had never expected to be pulled into the light. Madison stood straight under the lights like a beam in a room frozen in silence. Her white wedding gown clung to her slim frame, but the softness of a bride's expression was gone. It was the face of someone emerging from darkness with fire and thunder. She gripped the mic and spoke, each word precise, not a tremor in her voice, not a moment's hesitation. "I cannot sit idly by when I see a woman insulted in front of her child on a day that should be about love and unity." She took a step toward me, eyes still on Patricia. I certainly cannot when the one doing the insulting told me that family is everything, that blood will never turn its back. Patricia stood there, lips tight, as if swallowing a sharp retort that hadn't yet formed. Madison turned her stare to Lucas. He stood near the stage, pale, sweat beading on his forehead. No smug smile. No theatrical groom in control. Lucas, you told me your sister was a burden. You said she was selfish, clinging to the family because she couldn't care for herself. She paused, inhaled deeply, and her tone dipped with irony. Do you remember? The night before the engagement shoot you said, if I could, I would cut her from the guest list. A ripple of whispers swept the room. Several guests covered their mouths. Some looked at me, others exchanged glances. No one dared laugh. Madison tightened her hold on the mic, her words sharp as a blade. You didn't just humiliate your sister. You used her name to profit. You forged Alice's signature on at least 3 loan applications and 2 credit accounts in her name. I have copies of every document, legally verified. Lucas barked. Are you insane? Madison didn't flinch. She signaled the tech staff. The LED screen behind the stage lit up. There, line by line, were scans of bank accounts opened under my name, loan receipts with signatures that bore the same strange forged hand. I sat stunned, my heart pounding as if my chest could not hold it. Madison faced Lucas and delivered each line like a blow. You used loans in your sister's name to start your first brokerage. When you lost money, you borrowed more, signed more papers, and kept cycling debt under Alice's name without her ever knowing. I was silent. My whole body went cold. Those hard years rewound like a film. Every penny I'd saved, every sleepless night at the kitchen table, each time I'd refused Emma new shoes because the budget didn't allow it, while they used my name as a tool, a borrowed card to live the life they wanted. I had thought I was poor by fate. Turned out I was stolen from. By my own family's hands. Lucas snapped. You don't understand. I did it to help the family. It was an investment, not theft. Really? Madison tilted her head, her voice silk-soft but icy. Help the family. Then why for 4 consecutive years did you not pay a single cent back on that loan? Why did every bill come to Alice's old address, the address you knew she had long since left? Lucas fell silent. Patricia hissed. Madison, what are you doing? This is your wedding. Madison turned. For the first time since I'd met her, I saw an expression I couldn't place on her face. Not gentle, not joyous, but a deep disappointment, as though she were looking at a crumbling ruin. No, Mrs. Patricia. This is no longer a wedding. I cannot enter a family where truth is treated like a scandal, and kinship becomes an excuse for deceit and humiliation. The room went utterly quiet. Only the soft sound of Emma's sobs in my arms remained. I bent down and held her close, whispering, I'm here. I'm okay. Madison walked over slowly until she stood right in front of me. She extended the microphone and then bent slightly, her hand resting on my shoulder. You are not alone. And you never were a failure. I looked at her, speechless. It felt like a warm current flowing through wounds that had never been touched. Not because Madison defended me, but because she saw me as a person. Someone of worth. She turned toward Lucas one last time, her eyes no longer angry but resolute. I will not marry a man who can laugh while his sister is shamed. I will not bind myself to a family whose honor can be sold off with forged signatures. Lucas stumbled a step. Someone at a nearby table dropped a wine glass. The shattering sound was like the period on a verdict. I end it here, Madison said plainly. And I hope Alice will never have to stand alone again. She stepped down from the stage, her white gown trailing lightly across the marble, upright like a flag on a battlefield. I watched her go, my heart full of tumult and gratitude. No one in the hall spoke. They simply watched Madison leave the celebration, leave the family she had thought would be part of her life. And I, amid the stares and the simmering anger, sat there holding my child. I no longer felt ashamed. Only the truth, even if late, still carries the power of a new beginning. The sound from the large screen echoed in the silent hall, a faint tick as pages turned that pricked the tense air like pins. Madison stood upright, the microphone still in her hand, her gaze unwavering. On the screen, a signature appeared clearly, Alice G. Warren. Just below it, the borrower field was bolded. Under the guarantor section was Lucas's signature, a looping hand that nonetheless matched. The dates showed up right in the period when I was juggling 2 jobs, moving from the coffee shop in the morning to the hotel at night, nearly exhausted. An automated voice announced each item aloud. Loan of $125,000. Borrower, Alice G. Warren. Signed on behalf, Lucas E. Warren. A sharp intake of breath came from the front rows. Someone dropped a spoon, the metal clanged. Madison continued, "This is not just one document. This is the first of 5 different contracts spanning 7 years. All of them use forged signatures of Alice. All of the funds were transferred directly into Lucas's account." Camera flashes flickered. Reporters invited to cover the wedding pivoted their lenses to the stage. The sound of shutters clicking was like a sudden, heavy rain. I sat stunned, my chest heavy as if a stone had been placed there. Emma nuzzled into me, whispering, trembling, "Mom, they're saying your name." I held her tighter, forcing my breaths not to turn into sobs. Lucas flushed crimson, then went pale. He shouted, voice cracking, "That's not true. This is a setup. Anyone can fake a signature on a computer." Madison didn't look at him. She raised a hand. A video played. Footage from a security camera at a bank branch appeared. A younger Lucas walked up to the teller wearing a cheap suit. He pulled papers from a briefcase and bent to sign. The camera captured a close-up of his hand and the letters he shaped deliberately into my name. The bank verified the customer information and he nodded without hesitation. No one in the hall spoke. Only the PA replayed the teller's words. "Please confirm, did Ms. Alice G. Warren sign today?" And Lucas answered in a steady voice, "Yes." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." I felt dizzy, the blood drained from my face. I remembered that time, when Emma was just 2 years old, when I had to pick up extra night shifts to afford formula. I counted every dollar to pay the rent on our small apartment. Meanwhile, Lucas stood at a bank counter, using my name to obtain a sum equal to many years of my wages. Madison turned to the crowd. All funds were withdrawn within a week of signing. They were wired straight into Lucas's startup business account. And when that business failed and the debts piled up, Patricia used her influence to cover it up. He knew. She was complicit. Patricia slammed her hand on the table, sending a glass of red wine splashing across the white linen. "Shut up. You have no right to say this here." Her voice cracked against the cameras trained on her face. A reporter whispered loud enough for many to hear, "This isn't a wedding anymore. This is a financial scandal in the middle of Manhattan." Patricia turned to the crowd and screamed, "I was only protecting my family. What mother wouldn't protect her son?" An older man among the guests snapped back, "By destroying your daughter? You sacrificed her honor to hide your son's crimes." Patricia faltered, her face gone suddenly gray. I sat there, my gut twisting. Not only because I'd been betrayed, but because everything lay bare now in front of my daughter. I wanted to cover Emma's eyes, but she looked up at me wet-eyed. "Mom, they're saying the truth, right?" I smoothed her hair and whispered, "Yes, sweetheart. They did this to me." Madison lowered the microphone, then raised it again, her voice deeper and firmer. "Alice had no knowledge of any of this. She didn't receive a single cent. While she worked double and triple shifts to raise her child, her name was used to siphon off every dollar." A long silence followed. Then at the far end of the hall someone began to clap. One set of hands. Then another. A row stood and applauded. Eventually nearly half the room was clapping, not loudly but with steady approval. Lucas stood frozen like a wound suddenly exposed to harsh light. Patricia shook, her eyes darting. I bowed my head and pulled Emma closer. The feeling was both painful and strangely relieving. The truth had finally been named. And everyone had seen it. Cameras continued to pan. Reporters scribbled notes. I heard whispers, "Tomorrow this will be front page." No doubt about it. Madison finished and slowly lowered the microphone, her voice steady as she said, "No one deserves contempt for daring to live alone. But those who exploit family ties to hide crimes must be held accountable." In that moment I felt I was no longer sitting at the table near the kitchen door. I was no longer the shadow pushed to the edge. I was at the center of the truth. A truth they could not hide for another day. Patricia suddenly sprang from her chair, knocking it over behind her. Her silk green dress swept across the floor as she lunged for the stack of documents in Madison's hand. Papers scattered across the marble tiles, a few drifting all the way to the front rows. "This is fabricated," Patricia screamed, eyes wild. "This is a cowardly plot to destroy my family." Before I could react, she shoved me hard. The unexpected push sent me sprawling to the floor, my foot striking the leg of a chair. Emma screamed and ran to help me, her small hands trembling. "Mom, are you okay?" She was terrified, tears streaming as she clung like she feared I might vanish. Patricia didn't stop. She leaned down and snarled in my face, "You ruined everything. If it weren't for you, Lucas wouldn't be humiliated like this." She raised her hand, but before it could strike, a tall figure stepped in. "Enough, Patricia." A deep male voice rang out, clear and decisive. I looked up. The man was oddly familiar. Thomas, an old college friend. We'd sat in the same economics classes, swapped study notes before I gave up my dreams to raise a child. He wore a dark suit, stood straight, and put his hand between me and Patricia. Camera lenses turned toward us. Thomas helped me to my feet. "Alice, are you all right?" I gripped Emma's hand and nodded. He addressed the crowd, his voice carrying, "My name is Thomas Gray. I'm an attorney, and I'm also the person who filed the suit against Lucas Warren for signature forgery and misappropriation of assets. The only person authorized to testify to the full scope of this matter is Alice." A ripple of astonished whispers swept the hall. Some guests exchanged incredulous looks. Press cameras whipped into action, lights strobing. Patricia stumbled back, stunned. Lucas's face had drained of color. Thomas picked up a sheaf of papers from the floor and held them aloft. These documents contain sufficient legal evidence, including the bank's testimony and video footage showing Lucas forging his sister's signature. This is no longer a private matter. It has been referred to the authorities. All the noise quieted. The earlier snickers were gone. Only shock remained. I held Emma's hand, my heart taut and tangled. The years of hurt, the words I had swallowed for so long. "You are never good enough. You are a burden." Now, in front of hundreds, the truth could not be hidden. Patricia trembled and still tried to scream, "Who are you to interfere in my family?" Thomas met her gaze, hard as steel. "I am a defender of justice. And more importantly, I have been following this case since before Alice even knew she had been exploited." Madison stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. "Enough. I cannot be a bride in a ceremony where the bride must witness this. I hereby call off the wedding." The words fell like a blade through the room. The murmur that rose afterward was one of shock and disbelief. Lucas lurched forward, pale. "Madison, don't do this. We can talk." "No," Madison cut him off, her eyes flashing. "You lied to me from the start. You let me believe your family had only small conflicts. This isn't conflict. It's wrongdoing. And you stand there laughing at your sister while all she endures are the consequences of your lies." Lucas reached out to grab Madison's shoulder, but she stepped back. "Don't touch me. I don't want anything more to do with you." Guests began to murmur, some rising and leaving, others making urgent phone calls. Camera crews jostled for vantage points. Patricia sank back into her chair, head bowed, no longer shouting. I stood amid the chaos, holding Emma close. She whispered, "Mom, are they going to kick us out again?" I bent down and hugged her. "No, sweetheart. No one can kick us out anymore." Thomas rested a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Things have changed, Alice. You're not alone now." I looked around at the disordered hall, feeling a flood of emotions I could not name. I had never expected the truth to be ripped into the open with such force, right in the wedding they'd once hoped would be the family's crowning glory. Madison set the microphone on the table, took off her glittering wedding ring, and placed it in Lucas's palm. "This ends here." The room fell silent. In that instant I saw clearly. Truth, once brought to light, can destroy what deceit has built, but it can also open a path for those who have never been heard. And Emma and I were standing at the eye of that storm. A siren screamed outside the hotel and the reception hall seemed to hold its breath. Strobe lights of red and blue flashed through the thick glass doors, reflecting on the crystal chandeliers like streaks of lightning. The large doors opened and 3 uniformed officers entered, their steps deliberate and stern. A gray-haired officer stepped forward and announced in a commanding voice, We received a report of public assault and serious financial fraud. Who is Mrs. Patricia Warren? No one answered. The room went deathly quiet. All eyes fixed on the front row where Patricia sat, rigid, face ashen. When the two officers approached, she sprang up, voice wavering. I didn't do anything. This is a setup. They're framing me. But a nearby middle-aged guest spoke up. I saw her slap and push her daughter down. Hundreds of witnesses saw it. Camera lights flashed again. A reporter yelled to a colleague, "Film this. This is key evidence." Patricia struggled as the officers put handcuffs on her. I was only disciplining my daughter. What's wrong with family disagreements? The gray-haired officer kept a steady tone. That is not discipline. That is assault. You endangered a minor. You are under arrest for assault and endangering a child. The clink of metal handcuffs sounded sharply through the hall. Emma pressed closer to me, eyes wide with fear. I bent down and whispered, "It's okay, baby. Things are changing." Lucas, near the podium, trembled. When the officers turned to him, the lead officer spoke. "Are you Lucas Warren?" He nodded, lips quivering, not forming words. "You are under arrest on charges of signature forgery, financial fraud, and misappropriation of assets. All the evidence has been presented publicly." He blurted, "No. I only borrowed temporarily. I'll pay it back." Thomas stepped forward, his gaze stern. "You went years without paying a single cent. And every document confirms you intentionally committed fraud." The police put handcuffs on Lucas in front of all the guests. Camera flashes stuttered. A female reporter called out loud, "This moment will shake public opinion." The bride calls off the wedding, the groom arrested on the spot. Lucas turned to look at me, his eyes full of hatred. I did not look away. I simply met his stare, no longer afraid. Officers led Patricia and Lucas away, leaving a heavy emptiness. Whispers began to ripple. Unbelievable. This family used to be so admired. Poor Alice and her child. I held Emma, feeling her heartbeat slow. She whispered, "Mom, they won't make you cry anymore, right?" I squeezed her tight. "No, they can't do that anymore." Madison came over and gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "You've endured too much. Now everything is clear." I looked at her, speechless. Only gratitude flickered in my eyes, like a light that chased away the darkness that had surrounded me for years. Outside, the sounds of fire trucks, police cars, and passing people talking loudly drifted in. Some guests left the hall. A few remained, shaking their heads. Before long, the video of Madison exposing the truth spread across social media. The reporters who had been invited to cover the wedding live-streamed the whole event. Images of Patricia slapping her daughter, Emma's screams, and the documents displayed on the screen. Everything went viral. Within hours, the video reached hundreds of thousands of views. Comments poured in. "No one should be treated that way by their family. She has suffered so much. It's powerful that she stood her ground. Thank you to the bride for not staying silent. Lucas and his mother must pay for this." My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages came from coworkers, neighbors who rarely spoke to me, even faces I didn't know. They wrote, "Alice, we support you." Some simply wrote, "You're not alone." I looked at the screen, tears welling up, not from shame but from being recognized, from being heard after years of living in silence. Emma sat beside me, resting her head on my shoulder, and asked, bewildered, "Mom, why are so many people saying good things about you?" I smoothed her hair. "Because truth matters, sweetie. And today they finally saw it." I was no longer just the woman dismissed and seated in the corner of the reception. I had become a testament to injustice exposed. And truth, once revealed, cannot be buried again. The trial was scheduled for a fall morning. The Manhattan District Court was packed, not only with the press but also with curious members of the public, since my family's case had become a media focal point for weeks. I gripped Emma's hand as we passed through security, trying to stay calm under the flashbulbs and the repeated calling of names. Thomas walked beside me, his voice low. "Let me handle the legal part. Your job is to tell the truth." I nodded, grateful to no longer be alone. In the courtroom, Lucas sat at the defendant's table, his suit neat but his face gaunt and hollow, dark circles under his eyes. Patricia sat beside him, hair tightly pinned, lips pressed together. Neither of them met my gaze. The judge entered and rapped the gavel. The sound echoed and tightened the air. The prosecutor presented the evidence: loan documents, bank video footage, testimony from the bank teller. Piece by piece, the puzzle fit together. There was no room left to deny it. Lucas's lawyer tried to argue he did not intend to commit fraud, that he only borrowed temporarily to save the company from bankruptcy. The prosecutor countered with bank statements: loans taken 5 times with not a single repayment. All the money had been used for risky investments and extravagant personal spending. When the video of Lucas forging my signature was played, the courtroom fell silent. The judge furrowed his brow and rapped the gavel, punctuating the gravity. Lucas bowed his head and said nothing. When it was Patricia's turn, her lawyer claimed she was a mother who only wanted to protect her son, that her outburst at the reception was an emotional lapse. But the prosecutor presented a string of messages between her and Lucas, proving she knew from the outset, and even suppressed the bank's inquiry when Alice did not respond. Protecting a child is not the same as being complicit in fraud, the prosecutor said, his voice cold. And slapping and pushing your own daughter in front of hundreds of people is not an emotional lapse. It is assault. When called, I stepped up to the stand, clutching my papers. I recounted the years of working double shifts, the hardship of raising Emma alone, and the pain of being regarded by my own family as a stain. I did not need to raise my voice, I spoke truthfully. Emma was present, but the judge did not require her to testify in person. Instead, her handwritten letter was read aloud in the courtroom. My name is Emma, I am 9 years old. I just want to say that my mom is a good person. She did nothing wrong. Please do not let anyone treat my mom like she is invisible. I want my mom to smile without being afraid of people laughing at her. The room went quiet. I heard someone take a sharp breath behind me. The judge set the letter down and nodded. After days of arguments, the verdict was announced. Lucas was found guilty of financial fraud, ordered to pay heavy fines, to make restitution to the bank, and given a 5-year suspended sentence with strict supervision. He bowed his head, his shoulders shook. Patricia was convicted of assault and for conspiring to conceal the fraud. She was sentenced to 12 months in jail and fined, and ordered to participate in a mandatory behavior modification program. When the sentence was read, she screamed, "It's all that girl's fault." But no one paid attention. Officers led her out amid murmurs. What stunned me most was when the judge declared, based on the financial evidence and the documents presented, the court recognizes Alice Warren as the lawful heir to the assets that Patricia intentionally concealed and unlawfully transferred to Lucas. I froze, my hand gripping the wooden bench in front of me. I had not expected that, after everything, justice would not only clear me but also restore the rights that were rightfully mine. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around, microphones thrust forward. A reporter called, "Alice, do you have anything you want to say to the public?" I held Emma close and answered briefly, "I want my daughter to grow up in a world where the truth is heard, and where no one must keep silent when they are treated with contempt." Applause rose from the group standing in the courthouse hallway. I walked through without bowing my head. In the days that followed, the press overflowed with stories about the case. The wedding video replayed on TV, paired with images of me holding Emma in the courtroom. Many women's organizations reached out, inviting me to share my story as an example of the power of speaking up. One evening, while Emma was doing her homework, she looked up and asked, "Mom, was it right for me to write that letter?" I hugged her and whispered, "You did something I will carry for the rest of my life. You helped the whole world see the truth." She smiled, her clear eyes bright, then bent back over her coloring book. I watched her and felt a swell of belief that the painful past would no longer imprison us. Justice doesn't erase all wounds, but it opened a door. A door where Emma won't have to grow up fearing she doesn't exist, and where I no longer must carry the burden of silence. I received the assets awarded by the court on a chilly morning. The money did not make me instantly wealthy, but it was enough to sit down, take a long breath, and think about what I truly wanted. Many nights I had tossed and turned at my small desk while Emma slept, wondering, how will I use this chance to change not only our lives but hers as well? An idea slowly took shape. I remembered the hard years, how no one wanted to hire a single mother because I was seen as distracted. I recalled the skeptical looks when I submitted applications and the feeling of being superfluous. I decided to open a small accounting firm. Not a glamorous office, but a place where women like me could find opportunity. On opening day, I had only 3 employees. They were all single mothers. Carla, who had fled an abusive marriage and was raising 2 children. Denise, a former teacher who lost her job after having a child. And Mia, younger than me at 27, fresh from a community college accounting program. We sat around the tiny meeting table, an old wooden desk borrowed from a closed office, and I said plainly, "We'll start with small contracts. But we'll work with our whole hearts. And above all, none of us is invisible." Carla burst into tears, dabbing them away. Denise squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you for believing." The first months were not easy. I was the manager, the bookkeeper, and the janitor. When a contract was cancelled at the last minute, we sat and shared sandwiches for lunch. But Emma sat in the corner doing her homework and cheering us on. "You'll all succeed, Mom." Little by little, the business grew. A local shop hired us to manage its books. Then a small cafe. Then a mid-sized construction company. Clients came because they heard we were competent and because we worked with care. Madison stayed in touch. She called often, messaged to ask after Emma, and dropped by the office occasionally. One Friday afternoon, she brought several boxes of paperwork. "Some women I know need help with finances and they don't trust anyone. I thought they might trust you." We began hosting weekend meetups where women shared stories, learned budgeting, and most importantly, found emotional support. I looked at Madison and saw courage in her eyes. She had forfeited a wedding to stand up for someone she barely knew. Now we were like sisters, leading conversations where there were tears and gentle laughter. One late night after closing the office, Emma sat across from me with her homework. She looked up and said, "Mom, you won without shouting. You just stood strong." I was stunned. Her words hit me like an arrow to the heart. I bent and hugged her for a long time. "You make me stronger every day," I whispered. Emma smiled and lay her head on my shoulder. "You taught me that silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes being quiet and standing firm is stronger than yelling." Hearing her, I felt certain my journey had not been in vain. Years of enduring contempt, being turned into a joke, being pushed to the edge of the family table. It had all led to this moment. I felt no glee at Patricia and Lucas paying the price. I found no satisfaction in their disgrace. I felt peace in no longer letting them define me. True strength is not revenge. It is rising, rebuilding, and refusing to let anyone decide your worth. One afternoon, I rehung a small picture Emma had drawn. A lioness standing in a field with the scrawled words, "Lioness never bows." I smiled and hung it by the door. Every day when I walked through that door, the picture reminded me, I am no longer invisible. I am myself, and I chose to stand so Emma would grow up knowing strength doesn't have to roar. It needs resolve and the faith that you deserve to exist, to be respected, and to be loved. Looking back, I see the journey was not only mine. It mirrored many others. Those who were belittled or cast aside by their families. I once kept silent to keep the peace, but I learned silence protects no one. Only by standing firm and rewriting our value do we become truly free. What about you? If it were you, would you have the courage to step into the light and refuse to let others define your life? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story, because every shared voice can be a source of strength for someone silently suffering. And if you want to keep following, to hear more everyday stories of family, betrayal, and how people find themselves again, subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories ahead about families and new beginnings after the storm, and I believe you'll find a part of yourself in them.